first settling up the country, there were some kind of unscrupulous people that went to Austin and were finding some flaws in the title of the land. And there was a judge in Amarillo said, if anybody tries to take your land, just kill him and I'll defend you. And that stopped all that. There wasn't any more problem with that, people trying to take their land. And when Colonel Goodnight came here, he bought a lot of this script land. It was called 320 acres in the undivided territory of West Texas. And it was paper that the Republic of Texas paid to the soldiers who fought in the War of Independence. And he bought this land and put those tracks along the river, figuring if he could control the water, he could control the land around it. And he did that for several years. That did control the grazing for several years. But if you look at a map of our ranch, you see those little 320 acre tracts just going right along the river. But then when you try to match the other land around it, it makes a jumbled up mess. One section's got 14 corners, I think, where it just kind of chinks in between those little tracts. My grandmother was, Sammy Harrell was her name, and everybody called her Granny. But she only had one child, which was my father, Newton Harrell. And she was 8 years old when she came out to the Panhandle with her parents. And she was, their family was McElroy's and Camels. Her name was Barks. But then she went back to Missouri and then came back out here again later. And that's when she married my grandfather. She was 15 years old the second time when she came back. And she kind of had a way with horses. She liked to ride and was good with horses. She always rode a side saddle in the parade in Canyon. She was the first woman on the school board in Canyon schools. And then when they built Rex Reeves School, all these men would say, yeah, we needed a new school down there and we ought to build it. And they never would say to do it. And she just got up one day in the meeting and said, well, we're going to build that school. And she took a lot of flack for it, but she never did answer back or anything. She never said anything about it. About the same time, my dad was on the Board of Regents of the state teachers' colleges. That was West Texas State and North Texas State and Sul Ross and all those. But my grandmother would drive the buggy and kind of wait on my granddad. He was always trading cattle, and she would be the one that would wait while he went and did the trades. One time, he came home out to the place west of Canyon, and my dad said, where's Mama? And he never said a word. He just turned around and went back to town. He'd forgotten and left her in town.
I bet he didn't hear the end of that.
That's right. She said one time that they had a prairie fire, and she was there with my dad, and he was just a baby at the time. She was afraid that the fire was going to get her, but she said nobody came, and she didn't know what she was going to do. But when Granddad came in, he said, you didn't need to worry. He wasn't going to cross the creek. she didn't know about the creek. And my dad rode to school on horseback. There was about 10 miles to school. I don't really know how far it was to school, but I know he was too little to get on the horse. And they'd put him on the horse in the morning. He'd ride to school, and then when he got ready to come home at night, they'd put him on the horse and he'd ride home. But I stayed with my grandmother and went to school. And my sister did the same thing. She lived in Canyon. I remember one time it rained here and we couldn't get to school, so we rode down to the park and she met us out there in the car and took me into school. And another time we went over there and the river was too high and we couldn't cross, so I didn't get to go to school that day.
Just turned around and came back home.
Yeah.
I was reading an Armstrong County history book, about the dedication of the historical marker down here. It was a pretty big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Well, I don't remember the year, but my dad was president of the Historical Society in Canyon, and he wanted to commemorate the Old Home Range. And so we got a lot of the people from college at Canyon and and I remember my part in it was I went down the day before and spent the night at the home camp with Lucian Ridley and my grandmother. And the next morning she made sourdough biscuits and served to everybody. And then we would lead the horses up to Wayside, and the people would get on and ride them down, and then we'd lead them back up. And that's the way they got down there, because there were no roads at all. We had to go the day before, and we rode a horse down to the bottom of the canyon, and then got in the wagon and went down the wagon.
And what's left down there?
There's not really anything left. We put up a little marker, the plaque on it, and somebody pried the plaque off, but you can still see the marker. You can still see the corrals that Goodnight really built. They kind of fallen over, but that's about all there is.
And are there any, you found some Indian artifacts down there, right?
There's a few arrowheads.
Paintings or...
Yeah, there's a few that's called petroglyphs. It's a scratch in the rock. There's a few of those left in the overhangs. And there's a few for the grind holes where the Indians ground their corn. But the rock is soft and they don't last too long. So they're getting to be fewer of them all the time.
And what is your opinion on the Indians growing crops here?
I don't really know whether they did or not. We had some Indians come here. There was a fellow that came last summer that was a great-grandson of Quanah Parker. And he was very interesting. He showed us how they made arrowheads. But he didn't really talk about what they ate, whether he knew or not.
Okay. Did you think of anything during that you want to
No,
add?
not at all. Sound like went good.
Okay.
Just lots of
Like, where they lived is on the North Creek. Is that west of Canyon? Kind of where the country club is? You know where that is?
mm-hmm.
That's where they used to live. Okay.
Huh.